Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Golden Astrologer Podcast. This is Deb McBride, and it is Sunday, January 11th in the year 2026, the second Sunday in January. And I am recording this in lovely Escazú, Costa Rica. And we're going to look at the week ahead, is what we do here on the Golden Astrologer Podcast, but also we reflect on the week that has just occurred. And you'll remember that I talked about how the Sun and Venus and Mars were all going to have conjunctions among one another, and they were going to all oppose Jupiter. And so the last opposition to Jupiter was yesterday, the 10th, at 9:25 a.m. between Mars and Jupiter, and that's Eastern time. So it seems that this was an intense couple of days with these conjunctions. And what they're called in astrological terms is when something is conjunct the sun. In astrological terms, it's called cazimi, as long as it is 17 minutes of longitude conjunct the sun, within 17 minutes. And it's called combust when it's within 7 degrees of the sun. And so in the last week, they were cazimi because they were exact. Venus and the sun were cazimi because they were exact on Tuesday of last week. And then Mars and the sun were exact on Friday. And then there were oppositions. Now, oppositions are not cazimis and things like that and combust. But if the planets are within 7 degrees of the sun, they are called combust, which, it's like they're combustible. They're in the fire of the sun because the sun is so hot. So all of those planets are still within the combust of the sun. So Venus is 23 degrees right now, and the sun is 21 degrees right now. And then Mars is still very close to the sun at 21 degrees also. So although they're not cazimi anymore, they are definitely combust. So that's a hot bunch of planets. Hot Venus, hot Mars, and getting jazzed up and juiced by the sun. And so Mercury, I would say, has just entered the combust because it's 15 degrees and the sun is at 21. So it's less than 7 degrees. So this is definitely a hot dynamic, and we're still going through it, but they have released their energy. So I don't feel it as strongly as I was feeling it. And sometimes it's just a little too intense when we have these cazimis with the sun, especially with Venus and Mars, because this plays into our relationships. So if you were trying to avoid arguments this week, you might not have been able to do that. You had to diffuse situations knowing that Mars and the sun were hot and that Venus and the sun were hot. And so when we're dealing with these cazimis, it's like a vitamin shot to Venus and Mars or whoever else is there, right? So there's so much radiation, so much radiance from the sun, which, with Venus, you think that's lovely. But it's when there's two of them and then like there's an up and coming one like Mercury, it intensifies everything. And it feels like, when you're standing in the sun and it's too hot and you're like, I gotta get out of the sun. It's just beating on me. It's just beating on me. And not when you're, in a breezy place and the sun is shining, when it's just sun, right? And whether that's on the beach and the water is reflecting the sun, and what you want to really pay attention to is what that intensity astrologically is telling you. What is that giving you? How is that arriving in your life? Because all of a sudden you could be triggered. All of a sudden someone could be heated. The conversation could be heated. The relationship could be heated. So it could be a little passionate, right? But this is something we pay attention to when we see these cazimis, especially with Venus and Mars. They need some cooling off. They need some just space and breathing room and not this intensity. Yes, they can be very good for your personal life because it's the sun and it's the sun and Venus. And it's like, wow, what a beautiful aspect. This is lovely. But when I find it's prolonged like this, it's not sun and Venus meet. Okay, that's it. It's not sun and Mars meet. Ooh, hot. Okay, that's it. It's two of them bouncing off the sun. And that, remember a few years ago, I think it was maybe 2 years ago, there was this long transit of Venus and Mars together, and you think, oh, this is going to be passionate, this is going to be great. And it turned out to be really like too much, maybe a little too much in your face. And that's what I feel like this has been a little bit. It felt like I was being intensified by the sun, like baked in the sun, okay? And that was temporary, but it felt more sort of pointed. But there was Venus and Mars and the sun together. And so I hope that you came to some recognition, realization, some understanding of your relationships, your passionate relationships, your business relationships, because it was in Capricorn, anything that was enlightening you to the nature of your relationships, or maybe you came to some sort of turning point or awareness, because the sun likes to enlighten us. It likes to shine the light on something. And so I hope that this was positive and constructive for you in that way. So in the meantime, the last planet to oppose Jupiter is going to be Mercury. And Mercury will do that this Wednesday, the 14th. And that's 3:17 a.m. Mercury in Capricorn will oppose Jupiter. It won't reach the sun. The sun has moved on because it was always ahead of Mercury this time. And they'll meet up when the sun goes into Aquarius, which is coming very soon because we are in the last week of Capricorn. Can you believe it? Capricorn season is coming to an end. That means, Christmas was weeks ago. New Year's was weeks ago. We're moving past all of that. And so now we are moving into this time where we're going to go into Aquarius. But right now, everybody's marching in Capricorn. They've got their path and they're all marching through Capricorn. And they're going to continue to march through Capricorn. And then Venus is going to be first because she's like leading the tribe. She's going to enter Aquarius on Saturday, the 17th. So she will do that at 7:43 a.m. on Saturday. So she's going to be the first one to enter Aquarius. And then she will be followed by the sun that will enter Aquarius, of course, on Monday the 19th, which is not this week. It's next week. So we're dealing with Venus changing signs this week. And she'll do that switch from practical Capricorn to the unconventional rebellion of Aquarius, right? And that's going to be another lineup. So in these last few years, remember, we've had some interesting lineups. I think it's maybe been 3 years by now of lining up of inner planets together in the signs of Capricorn, then Aquarius, then Pisces. And it's been an intense beginning to the year every year because of this. So we're going to see this again. And as we see it in Capricorn, we're going to see it in Aquarius. But we're not there yet. We're just getting Venus to Aquarius at the end of the week on Saturday. And so in the meantime, what we're looking at is Mercury opposing Jupiter on Wednesday. And that is information, that is opening to information, being open to communication, opening our hearts to learning something, speaking our feelings, because Jupiter's in Cancer. And so if we feel like we want to say something and speak up, then this is the week to do it. But have a lot of care and forethought before you speak up, because sometimes Mercury, Jupiter's like, well, I just like opened my mouth and inserted my foot. So you want to be very aware of that as we move into this week, because that's not always a good thing to have happen. Spilling your guts, opening up and saying something too fast, too soon, telling somebody something and going, oh, I want to take that back. Let's just have some awareness and consciousness around our words this week, because we could say really good positive things with Jupiter there. And Jupiter often gives us some really good insight with Mercury. And so while we can express our positive thoughts, we can also get some insights into some things that are, been on our mind and how we want to think about them or approach them, or possibly get some new ideas, some fresh ideas from them. Okay, so these are things that we are experiencing on Wednesday. Venus is also going to talk to Saturn. So Venus is in Capricorn on Wednesday, and she's sextiling Saturn in Pisces, and she's going to make that nice, smooth relationship and have a very practical conversation with Saturn when she is in Saturn's sign of Capricorn. And then she's going to be busy when she then sextiles Neptune on Saturday the 17th, which, as you know, is at the very end of the zodiac, the very end of Pisces. And because Venus is moving quickly, within a couple days she'll go to Saturn, and then she'll go to Neptune, and then hours later, so that's 3:33 a.m. Eastern Time, Venus will sextile Neptune, which is very lovely and smooth and flowing and beautiful. It makes us recognize the beauty and have gratitude for it in our lives. But within a few hours, 7:43 a.m., she will enter Aquarius. And so Venus is going to move quickly ahead of these other planets, as I mentioned. And then the sun is going to follow the same path. So again, they're in a group, they're in a pack. So the sun will then follow Venus's steps and sextile Saturn at 5:41 a.m. Saturday the 17th, and then it will make a very nice trine to Uranus at 11:59 a.m. Now this is lovely because the sun is speaking to the outer planets in some very soft ways, and this allows us again to open up and see and feel something. I feel something transformative. I feel something exciting with Uranus. I feel some structure is good for me right now, sextile Saturn. And so we're moving into a very pleasant place for the sun to move as it leaves Capricorn, as it's getting ready to leave Capricorn. And then there is a great new moon on Sunday the 18th. And so that's really the big aspect of the week. Mercury and Jupiter is a pretty big aspect, but there is a big aspect here in the sun at 28 degrees Capricorn, 44 minutes on Sunday the 18th at 2:52 p.m. Eastern Time. So a new moon in Capricorn, right? So this is the end of the sign, and we've been seeing these new moons occur at the end of the sign, saying, what have you learned from this season that we've been in, Capricorn, and then before Sagittarius? And we have this very lovely new moon that is speaking to all the planets. Remember, these guys have all been in Capricorn, and that's Venus and Mars and the sun, and then Mercury is moving into those same aspects. But the moon will go into Capricorn on Friday at 6:47 a.m., and then it's going to pass through these same relationships opposite Jupiter at 8:14 p.m. on Saturday, and then touch the other planets. Okay, it'll square Chiron, it'll conjunct Mars, it'll conjunct Mercury, it'll sextile Saturn, it'll trine all the same ones, trine Uranus. They're doing the same thing, and then it will make that relationship to the sun. And there's more after that, because remember, Neptune is at the very end of the zodiac, and so the moon will connect with the sun, have that new moon, and then after that, sextile Neptune at 4:57 p.m., a couple hours later, and then it will go void and then enter Aquarius like a half an hour later or so, not even 20 minutes when it goes into Aquarius. So I expect Sunday's energy to be high. I expect there to be a lot of activity, a lot of connections to people. I'm doing a lecture for internations that day, so it should probably go very well because there's lots of aspects to the moon, and that's the public, that's people. And so we expect that maybe there'll be a lot of connections to your friends. You'll be having people calling you, visiting you, inviting you to lunch or something. It's Sunday, maybe you go to brunch. So I expect a lot of that. But it is in the dark of the moon until 2:52 p.m. Eastern time, which is when the new moon occurs. Now that new moon also triggers 13 degrees of mutable. So that's Virgo, Pisces, Gemini, and Sagittarius. So if you have something at 13 degrees of any of those signs, you're going to feel this new moon particularly. And so if you feel that this is a little too much energy, it's not impossible, because the moon, I have a long list of aspects on that day on that page. And then the moon will immediately conjunct Venus once it's in Aquarius at 9:03 p.m. And on they both go through the sign of Aquarius, where the sun will enter the next day. So then we're going to start this parade of planets again. First they were in Capricorn, now they're going into Aquarius. Eventually they'll go into Pisces, but we're going to start having the planets move into Aquarius, and it'll be Venus first, then the moon, then the sun, and eventually we're going to see the other guys and Mercury and everybody moving in. And it's interesting because Mars will have slowed down. Mercury is very fast, so it will move past Mars. It's like a race. It'll go past Mars. Mars will stay in Capricorn because it's the slowest of the bunch, and Mercury will then go into Aquarius. But all this energy in Capricorn for the next week is really going to be asking us to come up with some practical strategies, come up with some new ideas that can be workable in the practical sense of our lives. What is good for us to do to handle certain problems and get some solutions? Where do we get some fresh ideas for business? How do we start our new year? What kind of schedule do we want? Did you make some promises to yourself about, obviously, the usual beginning of the year new health protocols? But with everything opposite Jupiter, everything passing by Jupiter, there's a little indulgence in there. So if you fell off the wagon and ate cookies this week, after you promised yourself you wouldn't, in the last week, don't worry about it. Just get back on the wagon again and, go back to the new exercise routine, the supplements, the herbs, the, whatever you've chosen, the exercise routine. And know that all this Capricorn energy is really good for being successful with those things, right? And then what we're going to start seeing is everything passing over Pluto. And so this is important because once, Pluto is still early in Aquarius. It's 3 degrees. It's still early. Once planets enter the sign of Aquarius, they start passing over Pluto. So we want to be aware of how the transformation of Pluto is turning up in our lives, how that Pluto is getting triggered and where it is in our charts. And, it's in Aquarius. So where is that happening for you? And how do you feel when, then first we get the moon, and then we're going to get Venus. And as these sensitive moon and Venus planets pass over Pluto, what's going on? What are your relationships looking like? We've just experienced all this nice Jupiter energy, which is really big and optimistic and a little indulgent. But what about when it goes to Pluto? What happens? What will you be feeling? And so there's some quality of this. Again, there's intensity because it's Pluto. We're not just sort of floating through Aquarius. We're floating through with Pluto there. And this is going to be a very dynamic, transformational, rebellious energy. And as planets pass over Pluto, you might see things in the news that indicate rebellion and people dissatisfied. And you remember the French Revolution, and we're a ways from that at this point. But remember that Pluto in Aquarius stirs that pot, and recurrences are not far away from us, like how the revolutions were the last time Pluto was in Aquarius. And then eventually we're going to go into the eclipse season. Now, this new moon we're having next Sunday, a week from today, is going to be the final lunation before we go into the lunation, which is a full moon. that swings open the door to the eclipses. So we're not far from the eclipses are coming. The eclipses are coming. And here's an interesting thing. So you know that I told you last week that we had that full moon, that's a week ago, and that brought up a lot of stuff and brought things into the news. And I said it was already triggering the eclipse. And I got another confirmation of that this past week. My hairdresser, Adriano, lovely, lovely gentleman, has been working at the Anka Salon, and that's where I've been seeing him in the Intercontinental Hotel. And the Anka Salon had one beautiful location not far from me that I could actually walk to in Escazú. So it had two locations in Escazú. And then they closed them all down and they just consolidated the whole salon. There were three. And they consolidated into the Intercontinental one, which is a smaller salon. The other one was spacious and bright, and I really liked going there. And he texted me this week because when that happened, I gave him my phone number and I said, if something ever changes, you have to let me know. And I guess he forgot because he said he managed to get my phone number. Well, Adriano's birthday is February 17th. So the last time I saw him, I said, I have something to tell you. There's going to be some serious eclipses on your birthday, and these are big changes because it's a very powerful eclipse, and then it's right before the Saturn Neptune. And I was explaining this to him, and he's listening to me, and he kept saying, wow, wow. And he was like, I've got the chills. And so he texted me this week to tell me he's changing salons. And he's moving to a different salon, which is actually just across the highway from where I live, but it's right before where the Intercontinental is. So it's down the street a bit, but it's another shopping center. And so he's telling me he's moving into this place because he needs more of a boutique setting for his clients, a smaller boutique setting. So he must have contacted them. It said, I don't know. But I said to him, well, looks like that eclipse is already stirring up your life. Something's already happening. And he says, yes, I remember you told me. So right there, now I don't know if he was already planning this, probably, when I told him that last month before Christmas, and he really made the move already. He says, I'm not at Anka anymore. So this is pretty incredible. So of course I will see him there, the new place. And this means that the energies of the eclipses are already present in our lives. This means that somebody like him who's got the eclipse right on his sun in Aquarius, at the end of Aquarius, is going to feel this first, right? So we're going to have some feelings. If you've got a birthday around there, if you've got a planet at like 28 Aquarius, you're going to feel this, right? You're going to start feeling it already. And like I said, that full moon last week, we're feeling it already. And so this is it, folks. We're already moving through the experiences of the eclipse. Things are already telling their stories. Something's already telling the story of what the eclipse is going to be like. Now, maybe nothing's happening right now for you. Maybe you're just going to work, doing your thing, taking care of matters, at home, etc., and at your job. But it doesn't mean things aren't happening behind the scenes. Sometimes eclipses come out of nowhere and they bring us things out of nowhere. But look for clues. Look for clues in your life because there's stuff already stirring in the eclipse realm. So we want to really start paying attention to what the eclipses are starting to tell us, okay? The other thing is that we only have about 2 more weeks of Neptune in Pisces. And after this 12-year period, Neptune is finally going to leave its own sign. And it almost makes me a little sad because it's beautiful with Neptune in Pisces. There's a certain level of beauty and visionary qualities and peace and meditation. Not that the world is peaceful, because we've seen a lot of war action in these last bunch of years, but there's some quality to having Neptune in Pisces and not in a fire sign, not the warrior sign of Aries. that is, we're lucky to have experienced this because it rules Pisces. Neptune rules Pisces. And so it was lovely to really sort of experience and understand and connect with this. This is why, like, I think a lot of spiritual practices have come really into the spotlight in these last 12 years. Astrology has certainly gotten huge on the internet. It was huge once the internet happened. Astrology got bigger and bigger, and that was also, Uranus going into Aquarius, and then Pisces, and then, Neptune and Pisces. But when things are at the end of the zodiac, we get more of these esoteric subjects. And so you see lots of stuff, especially on Instagram, about astrology and energy healing and nervous system regulation and all sorts of healing matters, techniques, things that surfaced while Neptune was in Pisces. And, 165 years ago, there was a spiritualist movement. There was a lot of changes in religions, changes in spirituality, people starting to have seances, especially like in the UK, I think they were very popular, seances. And so that was the 1800s. We saw that with Neptune and Pisces. And then, we've got a different world now where we've got the internet, and it's, astrology and spiritual things are everywhere. People studying Reiki. I got my Reiki certification from my Lemurian 5D Reiki during this time, in 2021. And that's what's so interesting is like something like that is so far out. Lemurian 5D Reiki, Crystal Reiki, Rainbow Crystal Reiki. And it was not even in my native language originally, and then it got translated. So it's pretty far out. So maybe you've learned a spiritual discipline in this time with Neptune and Pisces. And I think it's been, as far as that stuff's concerned, we've been very fortunate for those things to come forward, It has its share of charlatans, of course. I've certainly seen a few of those around on the internet. But, the thing about Neptune and Pisces is we had to really discern who's right, who's good, who's got our best interests at heart, as opposed to who's, just blowing smoke in that Neptunian way. Neptune goes into Aries on the 26th of January. So it's only the 11th. So we've got a couple of weeks. And of course, I've been going on and on about Saturn and Neptune meeting in Aries, because Saturn will enter Aries in February. They will meet on February 20th, 3 days after the eclipse. And I want you to know, once again, that my look at 2026 astrology is available for purchase for $55. It's called Astrology 2026, The Rebellion of Fire and Air. And I invite you to purchase it. Contact me, info at the goldenastrologer.com, deb@debmcbride.com, or on Instagram. You can connect with me there, the Golden Astrologer. And you can purchase this and listen to all the details of where this is going to be happening for you, because I go through the houses. I discuss the houses of where that's going to be happening. And I want to say things are getting heated in the Saturn Neptune department as well, because we're at the end of something great. Now, if you saw my Instagram post, I made a 7-minute video the other day on Instagram, and I was talking very deeply about how we're all feeling right now in the intense astrology that we have, because this is an important thing to remember as Saturn and Neptune pass through the end of the zodiac. Something big is ending. We're not dying. The world isn't going to end, but some collective energy makes us feel under pressure, and that things are really chaotic and out of control. And yes, if you look at the newspaper and the news, chaotic and out of control. and the world is crazy, as people have been telling me for the last year. The world's crazy, but it's the end of something. And so the collective experience is everybody unconsciously worries. So this is what's going on. Everybody worries. Everybody gets freaked out. They worry about what's happening? What am I going to do? Because it's the unknown, because we're going into the unknown. We've got to trust the unknown. We've always been okay before when Saturn went into Aries. It's happened before. And to many of you, as long as you're over 29 years old, it's happened before. And so, Saturn ending the zodiac, Neptune ending the zodiac, the two of them together, this is hot energy for big changes. And so we are going to see big changes. And I am telling you that big stuff is coming and happening. And the eclipse energy is already getting revved up. So everyone feels the pot being stirred. And this is very unsettling and uncomfortable to people. It brings an unconscious anxiety. It brings things that go bump in the night when you're trying to sleep. But you have to know the important thing right now is to not look outside and point fingers at other people, other things, and other stuff, and etc., right? Because this is not because so-and-so is doing this, or this political party is doing that, or such and such a country is having this happen, or blah, 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 okay? And it's because of so-and-so that all of this is happening, and that's why it's blah, blah, blah. This is happening because the collective unconscious is filled with our unconscious, and I say unconscious, fears, anxieties, stuff that we're anticipating, okay? That doesn't mean it's going to vanish once everything gets together on February 20th. It means it's going to continue to be stirred for a little while because we're all getting settled into something new. And because of this, we must go inside and look at ourselves. Okay, this is about you. This isn't, this isn't point the finger. This is go look at yourself, because you have to own what's happening here so it doesn't freak you out. You can't be blaming people for what you're feeling and saying it's because of this that we're in this guy. They did this. There's a collective vibe going on, and it is the end of something and the beginning of something else, and people unconsciously don't like it. Okay, that's it. None of us like it. Me, myself included. It doesn't mean I consciously don't like it, because I like change, but there is a discomfort that is probably very unconscious in my being, and I have to go deal with that in my meditations and my own work, as all of us. And just because I know things that because I have a book that tells me them and I feel them, doesn't mean I'm exempt. I have to go through this as well. And so I might want to, shake my head at what's going on in the world, but I have to do my homework too. And all of us needs to do our emotional homework in order to move through this more smoothly without getting alarmed and alerted and hysterical and anxious and wanting to get into arguments. There's lots of people just getting into arguments with each other. And, a lot of it happens on social media, and that's a shame because that's not what it's for, but people are using it for that. And we have to be able to get through this together. And so it's important to find out what that represents to us. We have a story. Each of us has a story, and each of us gets triggered by the story. Now, of course, there are terrible things that happen in the world, and they are scary, but we can't degenerate into being triggered by politics, and we can't point fingers at each other because they don't agree with where we are politically. I think when people align to certain levels of politics, they are telling something about their own story, their own unconscious story, and some story that they had from childhood, whether there was a trauma or something. And I've said this before on this podcast, it was a while ago, and I remember listening to my mother go on, this was many years, it's like 30 years ago, about one particular political person, and I remember listening to her going on and ranting and raving about him, and I thought, this is not about him, this is about my father. This is about my father. And I just saw through the whole thing because of my training and everything, especially at that time, because I was really in the throes of my training. And I just thought, this is just this is ridiculous. She's not talking about the person out there. She's talking about her own experience of a man in her own personal life. And that's what it amounts to. That's where things are going. If your parents were on one side of the political fence and you're on the other, then maybe you are on the other because they were on the other side and you needed to do something to rebel. And it's, when you think about it, it's kind of crazy and silly. It's like, oh, this is why I get so upset because my parents did this on a regular basis. Okay, well, nobody wants to admit that, right? Nobody wants to admit that. Everybody wants to stand where they believe, but beliefs are beliefs. That's all they are. They are not right or wrong. They're just beliefs. Like anything in our lives, they're just beliefs, okay? So I could go on for hours about beliefs and belief systems, but really recognize where you get triggered and what that says about your life, and do your emotional homework and recognize that the astrology right now is very triggering and we could get into arguments. Don't end friendships and relationships with people over stupid things right now because you're getting triggered. Stay focused on what's meaningful. Stay focused and stay in your heart. And that's going to help you get through this. Stay in your heart. Forgiveness is non-negotiable, okay? We have to be able to forgive. It's about for us. It's about us, not about absolving someone. It's about us. And the more we stay connected to our own stories and recognize when they're getting triggered and we work through them and do our little homework, then we are going to get through this better. Okay, we're going to move through this more smoothly and we're going to be able to laugh at ourselves at some point. On that note, thank you for listening. If you'd like a session with me, connect with me on thegoldenastrologer.com, click book online, and set up a session for astrology, Reiki, expansion mentoring. Also, I'm on the internet on Instagram, and I just, like I said, go watch my 7-minute video and it tells you a lot, so go listen to that. It's the Golden Astrologer, and I'll be back here next week and we can talk about the last moments of Capricorn and the new moments of Aquarius and what that feels like. And I will see you in between on the internet. Thank you for listening. Gratitude to everyone.